To those who are new here, welcome to this Gita class through Lakshmi Venkatesh Foundation. We welcome you with open arms. Today's verse is chapter 2, verse 20. If I was to summarize this verse in a sentence, I would most likely say the soul is beyond birth, death, and all material change. So, this verse, न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचिन् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. This verse means that the soul is never born, nor does it ever die. The soul, having once existed, it never ceases to be. The soul is unborn. The soul is eternal, everlasting, and ancient. It is not slain when the body is slain. So if we were gonna say that in simpler words, it's basically saying the soul was never born, the soul will never die, the soul has always existed, the soul is eternal, and the soul does not die when the body dies. So this, I think I've mentioned this earlier, but this is fun fact, this is one of the most famous verses in the entire Bhagavad Gita because Krishna now removes every possible misunderstanding about the self. So if we're gonna go ahead, review, look forward to the previous verses that we've done. In verse 12, he says that the self still continues through time. In verse 13, he says that the self moves through bodily changes. Verse 17, he says that the self is indestructible. In verse 19, he says that the self cannot kill, nor can the self be killed. So notice something here. All of these mentioned two words, the self. Those of you guys who don't know this, by the self, here I'm referring to the self as the soul or our soul. So just know, every time I say the self, I mean our soul. Now, in this verse, Krishna gathers all of these teachings together and he makes one final declaration, which is that the self does not participate in birth and death at all. Not occasionally, not metaphorically, not partially, but not at all. So, one important thing that we need to know here are the 6 changes of material existence. So in Hindu philosophy, all material things pass through 6 stages of existence, you could say. Firstly comes birth. Something comes into existence. For example, maybe a baby is born, a flower blooms, or a tree or a plant, it sprouts from a seed. What comes next is existence, or asti, you could also say. It remains for a period of time. The child lives, the flower stands in the garden. Those are examples of something existing for a period of time. And number 3 comes growth. Growth, obviously, I think we all know what growth is. It increases, it develops. For example, a child grows taller or the tree has become stronger. Those are 2 great examples of growth. And number 4 comes transformation. What does transformation mean? It means a change or changes. A child becomes a teenager, or the flower changes color maybe. After number 4, it comes over to number 5, which is decline. That means it weakens. You could say that the body ages. We all grow old, that's a fact. So that's technically a sign of decline. Or you could also say the leaves begin to fall from the tree. And then last but not least comes destruction. That means that the material form, it completely ends. The body dies, the flower withers, and every material object that we know of follows this exact cycle. Think of like maybe a few examples: a mountain, a civilization, a star, a human body. Everything material, it moves through these 6 stages. Everything except the self. Now here Krishna says, "Na jayate mriyate va kadachin," meaning it is never born, nor does it ever die. So the first stage, it doesn't apply. The last stage, it doesn't apply. Context: by the first and last stage, I mean the stages that we just talked about, being born and then dying. So if Krishna here says, "Na jayate mriyate va kadachin," that means the soul does not die, the soul is not born. I kind of said the opposite, but that doesn't really matter. So if birth and death, out of the 6 cycles, if birth and death, which are 2 cycles, and they are the beginning and the end, if they do not apply, then the 4 stages in between, they truly don't apply either. The soul does not grow, the soul does not age, the soul does not decline, it does not transform from one state to another. The soul just simply is, and that's just how it stays. So think about yourself when you were younger. I'm sure all of us have like really cute baby pictures or something. I myself, I can definitely say that I do. We were all once a baby. We were all once born. We were all a kid once. Then after being a baby, you grew up, you became a toddler. You became a child. And then you became older, and then your height changed, and then your face changed. Your voice changed, your thoughts changed. But there is still an unbroken feeling, which is that I am still me. You are still you. You are still the same person that you were 5 years ago. And by same person, I don't mean like physically or like height-wise or like face-wise, or no. You have the same soul. You are the same person. Now, that's exactly what Krishna is trying to say. Despite all of this, despite the body changing completely, all of these physical changes too, something remained constant enough to call all of those stages your life. And Krishna, that's what he's pointing towards right now. That unchanging continuity that we have seen for like however long we have lived. That is an example that I'm using to try to like sort of make sense, because obviously it's going to be hard to decipher. So I thought that would make it somewhat easier. So the next part of the verse, Nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah, meaning having once existed, it never ceases to be. Now remember, we're talking about the soul here. Don't forget, just a reminder. This means that the self, it doesn't just suddenly pop into existence and then just like later disappear. The self or the soul, it's not an event. It is not a temporary phenomenon. It is not produced. Anything that is produced can be destroyed. Think of like a clay pot. A clay pot is made, therefore it can break. A building is constructed, therefore it can collapse. A bookshelf holds many books, therefore the bookshelf can break. I don't know. That whatever works. And by that I mean everything material works. But was the soul ever manufactured? Is the soul material? No, the soul is not a part of this material world that we are living in. The soul has no starting point, and therefore, because there is no starting point, there is no end point. That is one thing that you guys need to understand. So Krishna then gives 4 qualities. Unborn, the soul has no birthday, bodies do, but the soul does not. There was never a moment when the soul suddenly started to exist. Like, it didn't just like snap into your life or something. No, it's always been there. It's eternal, basically. So The second adjective that he's given us is eternal. The self exists in all periods of time. The soul, sorry, I did not mean to say he. The soul exists in the past, the soul exists in the present, the soul exists in the future. Time moves, but guess what? The soul is still there. The soul still remains. Third one that he gives us is everlasting. The soul never deteriorates, and nothing can wear down the soul. Time cannot erode it, and even experience can't weaken the soul either. The soul will always be everlasting. And the last one that Krishna gives us is ancient yet ever new. Now, the technical Sanskrit word to this is Purana, and this word is really beautiful because the soul is, this is going to be hard to understand, but the soul is older than the oldest thing imaginable. Yet, it also never becomes old. Everything material becomes old because it changes. Think of a mountain. Slowly every day, it starts to erode. Or think of maybe a marker. If you use it too much, you start losing ink, right? Everything material, it becomes old because it goes through changes. But the soul never changes. Therefore, it never becomes aged. So, if you want an example to this, imagine a light that has been shining forever, and yet it still hasn't been able to become it still hasn't been able to be dimmed. And that is the image that Krishna is trying to show us right now. That is the image that Krishna wants us to picture in our head. Okay, looking at somebody else's insight, right now we are looking at Sankaracharya's, and according to him, this verse proves that the self is free from all 6 modifications of material existence. So I've stated this multiple times. Everything material undergoes changes because it is composed of parts and exists within times. So the self, guess what? It doesn't do either. It does not undergo change, and it does not exist within time. The self is unborn, the self is undecaying, the self is changeless, it's eternal consciousness. And for Sankaracharya, this is why he says that grief and sorrow, it ultimately arises from the ignorance that we have, from the lack of knowledge that we can't put apart the body and the soul. Arjun sees that bodies are constantly changing, and Arjun mistakes that as changes of the soul. Krishna here, he is slowly removing that mistake. And another thing to remember here is that the self does not pass through birth and death. I've said this earlier. The soul does not get born, the soul does not die. But guess what? The only thing that does are material things, including the body. So now if we're going to look at somebody else's insight, let's look at Ramanujacharya. He thinks that the soul undergoes none of these 6 material transformations as well. He agrees with Sankaracharya, but, however, he emphasizes something really important. The individual soul remains a distinct entity. It is not absorbed into non-existence. It does not lose its identity. Rather, it eternally exists as a conscious being that is being sustained by the divine. Bodies, they come and go. That's a fact of life. Embodiments change, experiences change, but the individual self, the individual soul, it continues, and it's always been continuing from the beginning of your life to where you are right now. Their bodies may perish. Our bodies are obviously going to get cremated. Or if not, this is kind of disturbing, but they might rot. That bodies, they're going to perish, but our existence, our soul, that is never ever going to change. So go ahead, close your eyes, and imagine somebody changing clothes throughout the day. This is also a Gita verse. I think it's in chapter 2. I'm not sure. It's going to come up sooner or later. So imagine somebody changing clothes throughout the day. Morning clothes, school clothes, sports clothes, pajamas, and the clothing, it changes repeatedly, it changes constantly. Yet the person, it remains the same. It's still the same person, just in different clothes. So now imagine being so attached to the clothes that you think changing outfits means the person has suddenly disappeared or it's suddenly a whole new person. Now, if you thought of it that way, that would seem extremely crazy and absurd. But Krishna says that we often make a similar mistake. We become so focused on bodily changes that we forget the continuity of the soul, the consistency that the soul has given us. So that is something that Krishna wants us to remember every day. So, this verse 220, it is the most complete description so far of the eternal nature of the soul. And unlike material things, which undergo the 6 transformations of existence, birth, existence, growth, transformation, decline, and destruction, the soul experiences none of those 6 stages. It is unborn, it is eternal, it is everlasting, and it's ancient, but it also never gets old. So Sankaracharya, he sees this as definitive proof that the soul is pure consciousness, completely untouched by change, material change happening all around us. And Ramanujacharya agrees that the soul transcends all material modifications, aka the 6 transformations of existence. But he also says that each individual soul remain eternally real and distinct. These souls, all of these individual souls, they continue in existence beyond bodily death. Our body's perishing, that's not the last thing. Our soul is going to move on to another living thing, whether it be a mosquito, whether it be a cockroach, whether it be maybe a deer or a hamster. Our soul can go from this body to any living thing. This body is never the end. Together, these teachings, they reveal that the self is eternally outside the circle that governs material existence, and it makes the birth and death realities of the body alone, and not the true person and soul within. I hope this makes sense. Thank you.